June 12, 1944, 0630 hours. The choppy waters of the English Channel slap against the hull of the landing craft as it grinds toward the scarred shoreline of Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. Salt spray stings your eyes, the air thick with the acrid bite of gunpowder and diesel fumes. Waves crash like thunder, drowning out the distant pop of sniper rifles and the low rumble of artillery echoing from the cliffs above. In the bow, First Lieutenant June Wandrey clutches her medical kit, her knuckles white against the olive-drab canvas. The beach ahead is a nightmare canvas-twisted metal from shattered Higgins boats. Craters pocked like moonscape scars, and bodies strewn like forgotten rags in the crimson-tinged surf. You can almost taste the iron tang of blood mixing with the sea foam as the ramp drops with a metallic groan. June's boots hit the wet sand first, sinking into the muck that's already claimed so many. Move. Keep low. A sergeant barks from behind, his voice raw over the whine of incoming rounds. She ducks instinctively as a bullet zings past, embedding in the driftwood barricade nearby. Her heart pounds like a war drum, but there's no time for fear. The 352nd Infantry Division's remnants are still dug in up there, picking off anyone who dares the open ground. June scrambles forward, her slight frame 5 feet 2 inches of Wisconsin grit dodging obstacles that were once tanks and men. The sand shifts underfoot, treacherous with hidden mines and the weight of the dead. She spots a young GI, his leg mangled below the knee, dragging himself toward cover. Without a word, she drops to her knees, ripping open her kit. "Hold still, soldier," she murmurs, her voice steady despite the chaos. Morphine syringe in hand, she jabs it into his thigh, the relief washing over his ashen face like a tide. "You're gonna make it. Just breathe." All around, the beach is alive with agony. Medics from the initial waves, those who survived D-Day's slaughter 6 days ago, hustle between the wounded, their uniforms caked in mud and gore. But the influx never stops. Transports unload more troops, more supplies, and now, the first wave of field hospital units. June's outfit, the 128th Evacuation Hospital, is tasked with setting up just inland, in a shelled-out farmstead barely cleared of Germans. As she helps haul the wounded GI to a makeshift aid station, a cluster of tents, flapping in the wind, she sees the scale of it. Hundreds lie scattered, moans rising like a chorus from hell, chest wounds gurgling with each breath, limbs shattered by shrapnel, faces burned black by flamethrowers. The air reeks of cordite, vomit, and the unmistakable rot of gangrene setting in too fast. June's training kicks in, honed from months in Africa and Sicily, where she'd already seen the worst war could offer. But this is different. Omaha Beach isn't a distant front. It's the gateway to Europe, and the Allies are pouring through it, at a cost that's mounting by the minute. She spots Captain Eleanor Hayes, her superior, directing the setup. "Wandrey, get those plasma bags unpacked, stat," Hayes shouts, her face smeared with dirt. June nods, diving into the crates as more landing craft disgorge their cargo. The hospital tents rise amid the din, canvas walls trembling with each artillery burst. Inside, surgeons prep their tables, sterilizing instruments with whatever alcohol they can scrounge. Nurses like June are the frontline filters, the ones who decide who lives to see the blade. As the sun climbs higher, casting harsh shadows over the bloodied sands, the wounded flooding truck rumbles up, its bed packed with stretchers, incoming from the cliffs. The driver yells. June helps unload, her arms aching already. One man, a private from the 29th Division, clutches his gut, intestines spilling through his fingers like wet ropes. Another, a sergeant with half his jaw gone, gurgles incoherently, eyes wild with pain. The standard triage system: red for critical, yellow for urgent, green for walking wounded, feels inadequate here. Supplies are low. The beachhead is still contested, and evacuation ships offshore are under fire from U-boats lurking beyond the horizon. June realizes with a chill that if they don't adapt fast, this beach will swallow thousands more. She grabs a chalk stub from her pocket, marking tags on the fly. But as the numbers swell dozens, becoming hundreds, she spots the bottleneck. The surgeons can only handle so many at once. Plasma runs low, bandages are rationed, and the morphine is dwindling. "We need a better way," she mutters to herself, her mind racing. What if she improvised? Grouped the wounded not just by injury, but by survivability, factoring in the chaos of the beach. The limited evac routes, the incoming fire that could turn a stable patient into a casualty in seconds. A radical shift, born of desperation. But as another wave of screams pierces the air, June knows it's now or never. Little does she know, this split-second decision will ripple through the chaos. saving lives by the thousands in the bloodiest hours ahead.
The desperate improvisation, the canvas walls of the receiving tent shudder as another shell whistles overhead, exploding somewhere beyond the hedgerows with a dull, earth-shaking thud. June wipes sweat from her brow with the sleeve of her fatigued OD wool shirt, already soaked through with blood and seawater. The chalk marks on the triage tags blur in her vision, red-yellow, green, but the system is breaking. A surgeon, Captain Benjamin Rosenthal from New York, bursts through the flap, his apron crimson. Wandrey, we've got 8 tables going and 20 more critical coming in. Prioritize chest and abdominal plasma first, then to pre-op. She nods sharply, grabbing a fresh stack of tags and a grease pencil. No time for protocol debates. The standard army triage is built for steady flow, not this avalanche. Men from the 1st and 29th Divisions pour in on litters carried by exhausted corpsmen, their faces grey from shock and blood loss. One private, barely 19, clutches a sucking chest wound, bubbles frothing with each ragged breath. Another, a corporal with his femur shattered by an 88mm shard, screams as they lower him to the ground. June kneels beside him. First time to evac. Is everything here? Offshore LSTs wait to ferry the stable back to England, but incoming fire makes every run a gamble. You can feel the frantic pulse of the tent, the hiss of oxygen tanks, the clatter of instruments on enamel trays, the low murmurs of nurses administering whole blood transfusions from glass bottles swung on, improvised for pulsed and pegs hammered into the Normandy soil. June's mind races back to Sicily, to Anzio, where shortages forced creativity. Here, it's worse. Plasma boxes are half empty, sulfur powder running low, and the Beachmaster radio's constant delays in supply ducts battling the swells. That's when it hits her. She tears a page from her pocket notebook, sketching quick zones on the dirt floor with her boot heel. Listen up. She calls to the nearest nurses, Lieutenant Dorothy Hayes and Ensign Ruth Haddock from attached units. We're splitting the tent. Zone 1, immediate surgery, penetrating abdomens, major vessels, sucking chests. Zone 2, urgent but stable fractures, burns, we can splint fast. Zone 3, walking or delayed, get in plasma and morphine. Tag for later evac. It's not textbook, it's born of the moment, factoring the chaos outside. Sniper fire still pinging off the farm walls, ambulances bogged in sand, and the relentless tide of fresh casualties as rangers push inland. Dorothy hesitates for a split second, eyes wide. Captain, approve. June meets her gaze, firm. He'll approve when it works. Move. They rearrange litters in a frenzy, corpsmen hauling men like sacks of flour. June dives in, starting IVS with 18-gauge needles, pushing precious albumin to expand blood volume. A sergeant with arterial bleeding in his thigh gets a tourniquet tightened just below the groin. She marks him red, yells for a litter team to pre-op. Another, pale from gut perforation, gets priority over a screaming private with a compound arm fracture. Hard choices, gut-wrenching but necessary. Hours blur. The sun dips toward the channel, painting the tent walls orange through bullet holes. June's hands cramp from tying pressure bandages, her voice hoarse from directing traffic. Yet something shifts. The backlog eases. Surgeons operate without constant interruptions, tables turning faster. Fewer men slip into irreversible shock waiting their turn. A corpsman grins through the grime as he hauls another saved soul toward the evac jeeps. Your zones are working, Lieutenant. We're keeping em alive. But as dusk falls and the distant crackle of small arms fire intensifies from the bluffs, a new wave crashes in. Night fighters from the 116th Infantry hit hard, pushing toward Saint-Lay. June glances at the darkening sky, hearing the whine of incoming medevac ducks. Her system is holding for now, but one wrong call, one delayed supply run, and it could all collapse. And deep in the stack of litters, she spots a familiar face, a young lieutenant from the beach, assault waves. His tag smeared with mud, whispering for water as shock sets in deep. The breaking point. Night settles over Omaha Beach like a heavy shroud, the moon a thin sliver barely piercing the smoke that still drifts from smoldering landing craft. The temperature drops sharply, turning the damp sand to chilled mud that clings to boots and stretchers alike. Inside the receiving tent, Coleman lanterns hiss softly, casting flickering shadows across rows of litters that stretch out into the darkness beyond the flaps. June Wandrey rubs her eyes, gritty from hours without sleep, and forces herself back to the newest arrivals. The young lieutenant she spotted earlier, his name tag reads LT, Thomas R. Ellis, 116th Infantry, lies pale and shivering, a shrapnel wound in his lower abdomen oozing dark blood through the field dressing. You can almost hear the quiet desperation in the tent now, the wet rasp of labored breathing, the occasional sharp cry when morphine wears off, the muffled sobs of men who know they've drawn the short straw. June kneels beside Ellis, checking his pulse thready too fast. Abdominal wounds are treacherous. Infection sets in within hours, and peritonitis can kill faster than blood loss. Standard protocol would tag him red and rush him to surgery, but the tables are full. Captain Rosenthal's voice echoes from the operating area. Next, penetrating thorax move. Another nurse shakes her head at June. They're out of fresh plasma. The last crate was emptied an hour ago, and the supply ducks are delayed Agen German 88s on the bluff still ranging the surf zone. June's improvised zones have bought them time, but time is running out. She looks around. Zone 1 packed shoulder to shoulder with critical cases. Zone 2's splintered fractures groaning as corpsmen shift them to make room. Zone 3's walking wounded huddled against the tent wall, sharing cigarettes to steady their nerves. If they lose momentum now, shock will claim dozens before dawn. She makes the call. Elisilo tag, high priority. Get him albumin and sulfur. Stat, hold him for the next table. It's a gamble. Delay surgery too long, and sepsis wins. Push him ahead of a chest wound, and someone else bleeds out. Lieutenant Ellis grabs her wrist weakly as she stands. Water, please. His voice is a cracked whisper. June pours a few precious drops from her canteen onto his lips, tasting the metallic fear in the air. Hang on, Lieutenant. You're not done yet. She turns away before emotion can take hold, barking orders to keep the flow moving. Outside, Jeep headlights cut through the dark as more ambulances arrive from the Viaduct Road, horns blaring urgency. The 128th commanding officer, Major Charles Odom, ducks into the tent, his face grim under the helmet liner. Wandrey, report. How many through surgery tonight? 72, sir. Another 40 stabilized for evac, but we're critically low on plasma and whole blood. If the ducks don't make it by 0 she doesn't finish. Odom nods, understanding. He's seen the casualty estimates. Omaha alone projected thousands in the first weeks. Do what you have to. Keep them alive. As he leaves, a distant explosion rocks the ground. Naval gunfire from USS Texas, silencing a German battery. The tent sways, dust sifting from the canvas like ash. June returns to the zones, adjusting tags on the fly. A private with a traumatic amputation gets bumped up when his tourniquet starts slipping. A corporal with severe burns is shifted down when his breathing stabilizes after oxygen. Her system rough, unorthodox, born of pure necessities, evolving by the minute. Nurses follow her lead now without question. Corpsmen, anticipating her calls. The tent breathes like a living thing, pulsing with controlled chaos instead of collapse. But as the clock ticks toward midnight, a runner bursts in, breathless. Lieutenant. Radio from Beachmaster supply convoys inbound, but they're taking fire. Estimated arrival delayed 2 hours, and word from the cliff's big push at dawn. Expect heavy casualties. June feels the weight settle on her shoulders. 2 hours, hundreds more will come with the morning light. Her zones, her choices, her improvised lifeline, they'll be tested like never before. And somewhere in the stack, LT Ellis's eyes follow her, clinging to the hope she's fighting to give him. The dawn surge, the first grey light of dawn creeps over the Normandy hedgerows, turning the channel's waves to molten steel. Engines roar as the anticipated push kicks orphalite armor from the big red one grinding inland toward Colville-sur-Mer, met by desperate counterfire from hidden 352nd bunkers. The radio crackles in the tent. Heavy casualties en route, multiple GSWs, blast injuries, 8 or 5 mics. June Wandrey hasn't slept. Her eyes burn like the lanterns now dimmed to save fuel. She gulps black coffee from a tin cup, bitter as the night, and rallies her team. Zones hold. Prioritize is marked. We're the dam, don't let it break. The flaps burst open, and the surge hits like a tidal wave. Litter bearers from the 60th Medical Battalion stagger in, for to a stretcher, faces etched with exhaustion. From the Viaduct Rangers took a pillbox, but the Krauts had MG42s nested. One gasps, bodies pile. A sergeant with his scalp flayed open by shrapnel, exposing bone. Twins from the same squad, one with a belly full of fragments, the other a severed artery in the arm, spurting rhythmically. June moves like a ghost through the chaos, her voice cutting sharp. Chest to zone 1 occlusive dressing. Now, femoral tourniquet high and tight, yellow tag. Her grease pencil flies, adapting on the fly factoring not just wounds, but time to evac. Blood pressure readings scribbled on forearms when tags run out. You can smell the overload, the sharp tang of iodine mixing with the coppery flood of fresh blood, the sizzle of cautery irons in the surgical corner, where Rosenthal and his team work in a blur of scalpels and clamps. Plasma finally arrives, crates hauled from the beach by duck drivers who dodged mortar rounds all night. About damn time, June mutters, ripping one open and spiking bags to 4 lines. Ellis, still in zone 2, gets the first unit. Color returns to his cheeks as the fluid pushes back against shock. He manages a weak nod. Thanks, ma'am. Thought I was done, but the numbers are staggering. By 0700, 200 more flood the tent. June expands her system, roping off a 4th zone outside under tarps for the expectant. Those too far gone, dosed with morphine to ease the end. A chaplain kneels among them, murmuring last rites. Hardest call yet, a young private, intestines perforated in multiple places, peritonitis already blackening his abdomen. Black tag, she whispers, throat tight. Mercy in the madness. Corpsman adapts too, using helmet liners as basins for saline washes, bayonets to cut away boot leather fused to burned flesh. The tent hums with efficiency born of June's blueprint, surgeons hitting stride at 12 cases an hour. Evacs rolling out to LST 325 anchored offshore. It's Davids swinging litters aboard like clockwork. Word spreads up the chain. Major Odom radios chafe, 128th evac holding the line. Improvised triage, saving hundreds per shift. But June hears none of it. She's in the thick, stabilizing a captain with a fractured skull, whispering encouragement. Fight, damn it, for your men. As the morning sun climbs, burning off the mist, the flow eases. The dawn push succeeds, bluffs cleared, road to St. Lay opening. Casualties taper, but the beach bears scars. Over 1,000 processed through her hands alone in 24 hours. June steps outside for the first time in daylight, lighting a Chesterfield with trembling fingers. The sands stretch endless, crosses already marking the fallen. Her zones saved thousands from joining them. But as she exhales, smoke toward the sky, a final radio call crackles. Medevac complete. Beach secure for now. Victory's cost etched in blood and chalk marks. Yet, in the quiet aftermath, as nurses collapse on cots and surgeons scrub gore from their arms, June spots something profound. Lt. Ellis, patched and bandaged, loaded onto a jeep for England. He salutes weakly. In that gesture, the impossible achievement crystallizes. One nurse's desperate hack, turning slaughter into survival, chaos into a lifeline that will echo through the campaign. Weeks later, the Normandy beachhead has widened into a sprawling lodgement, hedgerows breached towns like Carrington and Cannes falling under relentless Allied pressure. The 128th Evacuation Hospital has leapfrogged inland, tents now pitched in apple orchards near Stanley, the air sweet with fermenting fruit instead of cordite and death. June Wandrey sits on an ammo crate outside the new ward, finally clean in a fresh uniform, writing a letter home on Red Cross stationery. Her hands still bear faint scars from suture needles and for spikes, reminders of those first brutal days on Omaha. You can picture her there, cigarette glowing in the twilight, replaying the faces, the private who lost his leg but kept his humor, the sergeant who proposed marriage in delirium as morphine took hold, Lt. Ellis who made it. Word came back from the hospital ship. Successful surgery, infection beaten, on the mend in England. Thousands like him passed through her improvised gates. Official tallies later confirm I/V, the campaign's opening month. The 128th processed more than 12,000 casualties, with survival rates far exceeding projections for a contested beach. Medical officers from 1st Army quietly credit one Lieutenant S on-the-fly adaptation, zone triage tailored to the chaos of amphibious assault, prioritizing not just wounds but the fragile window before shock became irreversible. Major Odom calls her in one evening, a rare quiet moment between convoys. Wandrey, he says, handing her a folded citation. This came down from Eisenhower's headquarters. They're calling your system the Omaha model. Other evac units are adopting it. Gold, Juneau, Utah. Even the Pacific theaters want the details. June unfolds the paper, eyes scanning the commendation for extraordinary initiative under fire. She feels heat rise in her cheeks, not pride exactly, but a quiet vindication. All those impossible choices, the lives weighed in seconds, the chalk marks that decided fates, they weren't in vain. Back home, the story will grow. June's letters to her family in Wausau, Wisconsin, vivid and unflinching, will one day become a book, Bedpan Commando, read by generations who want to understand what war truly asked of the women who held the line behind the line. Nurses who served after her will train on variations of her zones, saving countless more in Korea, Vietnam, and beyond. The Army Medical Department will formalize battlefield triage principles that trace their gritty origin to a blood-soaked tent on a French beach in June 1944. But tonight, as fireflies blink over the orchard and distant artillery thunders toward Paris, June doesn't think in legacies. She thinks of the boys who didn't make it, the black tags under the tops, the ones she couldn't save no matter how fast she moved. She stubs out her cigarette, stands, and walks back into the ward. New litters are arriving from the latest push. Another night, another fight against the Reaper. One nurse, one desperate improvisation, turned the bloody sands of Omaha into a place where thousands more saw tomorrow. Not because of grand strategy or wonder weapons, but because a 5'2" lieutenant from Wisconsin refused to let chaos win. In the end, the greatest victories aren't always marked on maps. Some are measured in heartbeats restored, in lives threaded back together by steady hands in the darkest hours.